The golden rays of dawn painted the endless wheat fields of New Eden in warm amber light. Jaiwan Park walked slowly between the tall grain stalks, checking the atmospheric processors that hummed quietly in the distance. After 15 years of hard work, this remote world had become something beautiful. Over 2 million humans now called New Eden home, and their farms fed colonies across 3 star systems. Jaiwan smiled as he watched the morning routine unfold around him. Farmers guided their hover tractors through the fields while children ran laughing between the crop rows on their way to school. The air smelled clean and fresh, filled with the scent of growing things and hope. The processors are running perfectly, Jaiwan called out to his wife Mina, who was kneeling in their vegetable garden beside their modest farmhouse. She looked up and brushed dirt from her hands, her face bright with satisfaction as she examined the healthy tomatoes and peppers growing there. Another perfect harvest season coming, Jaiwan said, walking over to join her. Their 2 children, 8-year-old Hyun and 6-year-old Yuna, were playing with toy spaceships in the dirt nearby, making whooshing sounds as they flew their plastic vessels through imaginary asteroid fields. Mina stood and kissed her husband's cheek. Hard to believe we were worried about the soil chemistry when we first arrived. Now look at this place. Indeed, New Eden had transformed from a barren rock into humanity's agricultural crown jewel. The terraforming project had taken decades, but now rivers flowed where there had been only dust. Forests grew where nothing had lived before. Cities rose from empty plains, filled with schools and hospitals and parks where children played safely. Captain Do-hyun Lee sat in the small defense station orbiting New Eden, reviewing routine patrol reports. The colony's military presence was minimal, just a few patrol boats and orbital sensors. Nobody expected trouble this far from the main shipping lanes. New Eden was too peaceful, too remote, too unimportant for anyone to bother attacking. The morning calm shattered without warning. Do-hyun's instruments screamed with alarm signals as massive shapes materialized in the space around New Eden. His eyes widened in disbelief as he counted 12 enormous vessels, each one larger than anything in human space. The alien ships were dark and angular, covered in weapons that bristled like thorns. "Get me a transmission to Earth Command right now," Do-hyun shouted to his communications officer, Minsu. Minsu's fingers flew over his control panel, but his face grew pale as he worked. "Sir, they're jamming all our long-range communications. I can barely get a signal to the outer system beacon." The alien dreadnoughts moved with terrible purpose, spreading out to surround the helpless planet below. Do-hyun watched his sensors track targeting beams as they swept across New Eden's cities and farmlands. "All defense platforms open fire," Do-hyun ordered, but his voice carried the hopelessness they all felt. New Eden's few weapons were toys compared to the massive alien fleet. The first orbital strike hit New Geneva, the colony's capital city. A pillar of superheated plasma fell from space like the finger of an angry god, and where it touched, buildings simply vanished. The city's 200,000 inhabitants had no time to run, no place to hide. Jaiwan felt the ground shake beneath his feet and looked up to see fire falling from the sky. The plasma beam struck 50 kilometers away, but the flash was bright enough to hurt his eyes. A mushroom cloud rose where New Geneva had been just moments before. "Mina, get the children," Jaiwan shouted, but more beams were already falling. The agricultural processing centers exploded one by one. The spaceport became a crater of molten metal. The universities where human children learned about art and science became smoking ruins. Mina grabbed Hyun and Yuna, pulling them close as their farmhouse began to shake apart. The children cried in terror as windows shattered and walls cracked. The toy spaceships fell forgotten in the dirt as real death fell from the stars above. Ensign Sunho Kim worked frantically in the defense station's communication center, trying to get word to the rest of human space. The jamming was too strong for normal transmissions, but he had one last option. His fingers moved quickly over the emergency beacon controls, programming an automated probe with all the sensor data they had gathered. "Sir, I can launch a courier probe to the hyperspace relay," Sunho called out to Captain Do-hyun. "It might get through if I launch it now." "Do it," Do-hyun replied, watching helplessly as another city disappeared in fire below them. Sunho sealed the probe's memory banks with footage of the attack and launched it toward the edge of the system just as plasma beams began targeting the defense station itself. The small automated messenger streaked away into hyperspace, carrying humanity's final cry for help. The bombardment continued for hours. Every city, every farm, every sign of human presence on New Eden was systematically destroyed. The aliens showed no mercy, no hesitation. They erased 2 million human lives with the cold efficiency of exterminators clearing out insects, Jaiwan held his family close as their world died around them. The farmhouse collapsed, but somehow they survived in the basement for a few more minutes. Through the cracks in the broken walls, he could see the wheat fields burning, the golden grain turning to ash and smoke. Why? Mina whispered through her tears. Why are they doing this to us? Jaiwan had no answer. New Eden had been peaceful, isolated, no threat to anyone. But the aliens had come anyway and they were killing everyone. By sunset the attacks finally stopped. New Eden hung in space like a burned ember, its atmosphere choked with smoke and radiation. No lights shone from its surface. No voices called across its empty fields. The tomb world spun silently in the darkness, a monument to sudden, senseless death. 2.5 million human beings were gone, their dreams and hopes extinguished in a single day of horror. 3 days after New Eden died, the automated probe finally reached Frontier Command Station Prometheus. Admiral Juno Kong was reviewing supply reports when his aide Lieutenant Saman Choi burst into his office, her face white with shock. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," Saman said, her voice shaking as she activated the holographic display. Emergency transmission from New Eden. Juno watched in growing horror as the probe's recorded data played before him. The massive alien ships appearing without warning. The systematic destruction of every city. The plasma beams that turned 2.5 million humans into ash and memories. When the recording ended, silence filled the room like a physical weight. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," Juno said quietly. "Priority Alpha protocols. Wake up everyone." Within hours, the news spread across human space like a wildfire consuming dry grass. On Earth, Prime Minister Kyung-Soo Han stood before emergency news cameras, his hands trembling slightly as he held the report from New Eden. Behind him, the flags of 200 human worlds hung at half-staff. "My fellow humans," Kyung-Soo began, his voice carrying to billions of people across dozens of star systems. "Today we learned that our colony of New Eden has been completely destroyed by an unknown alien force. Every man, woman, and child living there has been murdered. On the industrial world of Nova Sol, factory worker Min Jae-oh stopped his assembly line and stared at the news broadcast. Around him, thousands of other workers did the same. The massive manufacturing plant fell silent except for the sound of people crying. On the farming planet of New Busan, elderly colonist Haejin Lee remembered her granddaughter who had moved to New Eden just last year to start a new farm. The young woman's letters had been so full of hope and excitement about the harvest season. Now there would be no more letters, no more laughter, no more dreams. The United Earth Defense Council convened an emergency session within 12 hours. Representatives from every human world appeared as holograms in the Great Assembly Hall on Earth. Fleet Admiral Taehyun Nam stood at the center, his weathered face grim as he addressed the gathering. "The aliens who did this call themselves the Hegemony," Taehyun announced. "Our intelligence suggests they see human expansion as a threat to their control of this region of space. New Eden was meant to be a warning, a message telling us to stay in our place." Angry voices erupted from the assembled representatives. Calls for immediate military action filled the chamber. But Admiral Taehyun raised his hand for silence, and when he spoke again, his words carried the weight of terrible purpose. "The hegemony wanted to send us a message," he said slowly. "We will send them one back. But our message will be written in the wreckage of their fleets." What the aliens did not know, what no species in the galaxy suspected, was that humanity had been preparing for exactly this kind of attack for over 50 years. The Sleeping Fleet project had been Earth's greatest secret, hidden even from most human military officers. Director Yoonji Han had spent her entire adult life overseeing the project from a classified facility deep beneath Earth's surface. She stood now before banks of computers that controlled the most massive military buildup in galactic history. Her finger hovered over a single red button that would change everything. "Authorization confirmed," Yoonji said into her headset. "Begin Operation Thunder Wake. All dormant facilities are now active." Across human space, things that had slept in darkness for decades suddenly blazed to life. Hidden shipyards built inside hollowed-out asteroids began powering their massive construction bays. Automated factories that had been disguised as mining operations started producing weapons and ammunition at incredible rates. Captain Seo Jun-yoon had spent 15 years waiting for this moment. He floated in zero gravity beside his battleship, the Incheon's Pride, watching as its enormous hull came alive with lights for the first time since it was built. Around him in the hidden asteroid base, hundreds of other ships began their awakening process. "All systems online," reported his engineering officer, Commander Jisoo Park. "Reactor core stable. Weapons systems ready. We can launch within 6 hours." Similar scenes played out in over 3,000 secret locations. Ships that had been built and then immediately put into cold storage were now receiving their crews for the first time. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the aliens had ever seen. The scope of humanity's preparation was staggering. While appearing to focus on peaceful trade and farming, human industrial capacity had been quietly building the largest military fleet in galactic history. 500,000 warships of every class, all equipped with weapons designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat. Admiral Kyung-min Park commanded one of the largest hidden fleets from her dreadnought Soul's Vengeance. As her ship powered up its massive engines, she watched 300 other capital ships doing the same. Each vessel was larger and more heavily armed than anything in the known galaxy. Signal from Earth Command, her communications officer reported. All fleets are to rendezvous at staging area Tango 7. We deploy to hegemony space in 72 hours. Meanwhile, hegemony long-range sensors began detecting unusual energy signatures throughout human territory. Intelligence analyst Velmore studied the readings with growing alarm. The power outputs were unlike anything they had seen from human ships before. How many vessels are they activating? Demanded Hegemony Fleet Commander Zekthal. Initial estimates suggest at least 50,000 ships, Velmore replied nervously. But sir, these energy signatures are much larger than their known fleet capabilities. 50,000 ships? Zekthal laughed harshly. We have the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Let the humans come with their little boats. But as more reports came in, Zekthal's confidence began to waver. The energy signatures kept growing. Human ships were emerging from hiding places throughout their territory in numbers that seemed impossible. Sir, Velmore said quietly, updated estimates suggest the humans may be fielding over 500,000 vessels. The hegemony's combined military forces numbered barely 50,000 ships total. They had awakened something vast and terrible, something that had been waiting patiently in the darkness for exactly this moment. Humanity's peaceful facade had hidden the greatest military buildup in galactic history. The sleeping giant was finally awake, and it was very, very angry. The awakening began at exactly 0600 hours across all human territories. Admiral Kyung-min Park stood on the bridge of her massive dreadnought Soul's Vengeance, watching through the viewport as the hidden asteroid base around them came alive with activity. For 20 years, this hollowed-out rock had been home to over 300 sleeping warships. Now they were all waking up at once. Reactor online, reported her engineering officer as the Soul's Vengeance shuddered with power. All weapon systems active. Shield generators at full capacity. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Kyung-min could see other ships emerging from their hiding places. Destroyers that had been dark and cold for decades now blazed with running lights. Cruisers larger than most space stations powered up their massive engines. And everywhere, the giant dreadnoughts like her own ship began to move with terrible purpose. Signal from the Busan Victory, her communications officer announced. Commander Jin-hee Lim is coordinating fleet organization. Aboard the carrier Busan Victory, Commander Jin-hee Lim stared at tactical displays that showed the true scope of what humanity had been building in secret. Her screens lit up with thousands of green dots, each one representing a warship coming online. Destroyer squadrons that numbered in the hundreds. Cruiser groups that could destroy entire planets. Dreadnought formations capable of cracking moons like eggs. This is incredible, whispered her tactical officer, Lieutenant Minwo Kim. I knew the sleeping fleet was big, but this is the largest military force in galactic history. Jin-hee nodded grimly as she watched the numbers climb. 500,000 ships, all built in complete secrecy while the galaxy thought humanity was focused on peaceful farming and trade. Each vessel was equipped with the most advanced weapons human science could create. Each crew had trained their entire lives for this moment. Send fleet organization orders to all task group commanders, Jin-hee ordered. Battle formation Echo 7. We're going to need perfect coordination for what comes next. Light years away in hegemony space, Prime Nexarch Veltar stared at the intelligence reports with growing horror. The hegemony's most advanced sensors were detecting massive energy signatures throughout human territory. Ships that had never appeared on any scanner before were suddenly broadcasting power readings that defied belief. Explain this to me again, Veltar demanded of his intelligence chief, Kexmol. How many vessels are the humans mobilizing? Kexmol's alien features were pale with fear as he consulted his data tablets. Initial estimates suggested 50,000 ships, Prime Nexarch. But the readings keep climbing. Current estimates are now at 500,000 vessels. The words hit Veltar like a physical blow. The entire hegemony military, built up over centuries of conquest, numbered barely 50,000 ships total. The humans had somehow hidden a fleet 10 times larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. That's impossible, Veltar said weakly. Our observers have been monitoring human space for decades. They build cargo haulers and farming equipment. They have no military industrial capacity. Apparently we were wrong, Prime Nexarch, Kexmol replied. Intelligence suggests they've been building this fleet in secret for over 50 years. Hidden shipyards, automated factories, entire star systems converted to weapons production. Veltar sank into his command chair as the full implications hit him. The hegemony had destroyed New Eden to send a message, to warn humanity to stay in their place. Instead, they had awakened something vast and terrible that had been waiting patiently for exactly this provocation. In human space, Captain Dongwon Seo walked slowly around his destroyer's bridge, checking each station as his ship prepared for its first combat mission. The vessel had been built 15 years ago but never used, waiting in a hidden dock inside a hollow moon. Now it hummed with deadly purpose. Sir, his weapons officer called out. The hull painters have finished their work. Dongwon looked through the bridge windows at his ship's hull, where workers had been painting names in silver letters. The names of New Eden's dead covered every available surface. Jaiwan Park and his family. Captain Do-Hyun Lee and his crew. Every man, woman, and child who had died in the hegemony's unprovoked attack. Make sure those letters shine bright, Dongwon ordered. I want the aliens to see them clearly when we send them to hell. Similar scenes played out across thousands of ships. Each vessel carried the names of the murdered colonists, painted in silver that would gleam in the light of burning enemy worlds. The fleet had become a floating memorial to humanity's dead, and their crews carried a burning desire for justice. Admiral He Jin-yu commanded the Northern Fleet Group from her flagship Taegu Thunder. Around her, 50,000 ships moved in perfect formation, their combined mass equivalent to a small moon. She watched the tactical displays as other fleet groups reported ready status from across human space. All task forces report ready for hyperspace jump, her navigation officer announced. He-Jin opened the fleet-wide communication channel, knowing her words would reach 500,000 human warriors preparing for the largest military operation in galactic history. Attention all ships, she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. For 2,300 years, humanity has spread peacefully among the stars. We've built farms instead of fortresses. We've chosen trade over conquest. We've offered friendship to every species we've encountered. She paused, looking out at the vast armada surrounding her flagship. The hegemony saw this as weakness. They murdered our children to send us a message. Today we send them our reply. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. Destination, hegemony core worlds. Show them what happens when they mistake our peaceful nature for helplessness. Show them what happens when they murder our children. The fleet jumped as one, 500,000 ships vanishing into hyperspace like angels of death seeking justice. The sleeping giant was awake and it was coming for blood. The first sign of the human armada's arrival was the way space itself seemed to bend and twist around the Kethvar system. Admiral Wanho Jin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as hyperspace portals opened like flowers of light across the darkness. What emerged would haunt alien nightmares for generations to come. 50,000 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the silver names of New Eden's dead. The lead vessels were massive dreadnoughts, each one larger than the hegemony's biggest battle stations. Behind them came wave after wave of cruisers, destroyers, and carriers, their combined mass darkening the stars themselves. Sir, we're detecting 8,000 enemy vessels defending the system, reported Lieutenant Hoseo Chung from his sensor station. They're moving to intercept us. Admiral Wanho studied the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Kethvar was supposed to be the hegemony's most heavily defended fortress world, protected by more ships than most entire species possessed. Against any normal enemy, 8,000 vessels would have been an overwhelming force. Against humanity's awakened fury, they were nothing more than leaves scattered before a hurricane. Signal Captain Minjian, Wanho ordered. Begin the attack. Captain Minjian felt her heart racing as she received the order aboard her heavy cruiser Taegu Thunder. Around her, the bridge crew worked with focused intensity, their faces lit by the glow of weapon displays and targeting computers. Each person wore a small photograph pinned to their uniform, images of the children who had died on New Eden. All weapons ready, Captain, reported her gunnery officer. Enemy ships are closing to engagement range. Fire when ready, Minji said quietly. Make every shot count. We're doing this for them. The Tegu Thunder's main gun spoke with voices of thunder, sending streams of plasma across the void toward the approaching hegemony fleet. Around her, hundreds of other human ships opened fire simultaneously, turning space into a web of deadly energy beams and missile trails. The hegemony defenders fought bravely, but they were facing an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. Their ships were designed for individual combat, elegant vessels meant to duel with opponents of similar size and capability. The humans fought like a pack of wolves, sending 10 ships against every one enemy, overwhelming their targets with pure numerical superiority. Commander Jae-hyun Go watched the battle unfold from his battleship's command center, his tactical screens showing the systematic destruction of the enemy fleet. Where a single hegemony cruiser tried to engage a human vessel, it found itself surrounded by an entire squadron. Where they deployed a battle group, the humans responded with a full fleet formation. Enemy vessel attempting to ram the Soul's Pride, reported his weapons officer. Intercept it, Jae-hyun ordered. Don't let any of them through. The human ships moved with mechanical precision, their crews trained for exactly this kind of battle. Every formation had been practiced countless times in simulation. Every tactical maneuver had been drilled until it became instinct. The aliens were fighting a military force that had spent 50 years preparing for this single moment. Lieutenant Soyoung Kim led her fighter squadron through the chaos of the main battle, her small craft darting between the massive capital ships like metallic birds of prey. Her cockpit display showed dozens of targets, alien fighters trying desperately to protect their larger vessels. Remember what they did to New Eden, she told her pilots over the communication channel. Remember the children who will never grow up because of these monsters. Her targeting computer locked onto an enemy fighter, and she squeezed the trigger without hesitation. The alien craft exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Around her, the other human fighters swept through the enemy formations with deadly efficiency, their laser cannons and missiles finding their marks with mechanical precision. Each human pilot carried photos of New Eden's children in their cockpits. Little Hyun and Yuna Park, who had been playing with toy spaceships when the attack began. The schoolchildren who had been walking to class when the plasma beams fell from the sky. Their innocent faces stared out from the photographs, demanding justice for their murders. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The hegemony's 8,000 ships crumbled under the overwhelming firepower of 50,000 human vessels. Their elegant cruisers broke apart under concentrated missile barrages. Their proud battleships were torn open by plasma cannons that could melt through armor plating like it was paper. As the last enemy ships fell silent, Admiral Changmin Lee accepted the system's surrender from his flagship's command deck. The hegemony garrison commander appeared on his view screen, his alien features twisted with fear and defeat. "We surrender unconditionally," the alien said in broken human language. "Please show mercy to our civilians." Changmin's eyes were cold as winter stars. "You showed no mercy to New Eden's civilians. You murdered 2.5 million innocent people without warning or provocation." That was different," the alien stammered. "Those were military decisions made by our high command." "Then your high command will answer for their crimes," Changmin replied. He turned to his communications officer, Ensign Yunho Baek. "Broadcast this message to all hegemony worlds. Tell them that Kethvar has fallen. Tell them that 50,000 human ships destroyed 8,000 of their best vessels in 6 hours. Tell them this is what happens when they mistake our peaceful nature for weakness." Yunho's fingers moved across his control panel, sending the message across hegemony space at faster-than-light speeds. Within hours, every alien world would know that humanity's retaliation had begun. As word of Kethvar's destruction spread, entire hegemony star systems began surrendering without firing a single shot. The aliens who had orchestrated New Eden's massacre now faced the terrifying reality of humanity's true military potential. The peaceful farmers and traders they had dismissed as weaklings had revealed themselves as the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. The tide of steel and fire was just beginning. The final battle began when 500,000 human warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Prime Ascendant system. Fleet Admiral Taehyun Nam stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, Earth's Fury, watching as the largest military armada in galactic history spread out before him like a metal ocean stretching to infinity. "Sir, we're detecting 25,000 enemy vessels defending the capital," reported his tactical officer, Commander Jinwoo Seo. "They've positioned themselves in a defensive sphere around the planet." Taehyun nodded grimly as he studied the holographic display. Prime Ascendant was the heart of hegemony civilization, home to over 10 billion aliens who had ruled this section of the galaxy for centuries. Every ship they had left was gathered here for one final, desperate stand. Signal Admiral Youngmi Shin on the right flank and Admiral Sungo Park on the left, Taehyun ordered. Begin deployment into attack formation. Today we finish what they started at New Eden. Admiral Youngmi Shin felt the deck of her dreadnought Gwangju's Wrath vibrate as the massive ship's engines powered up to full thrust. Through her viewports, she could see endless rows of human vessels extending in all directions. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and carriers formed a wall of steel and firepower that stretched across light minutes of space. All ships report ready for combat, her communications officer announced. The fleet is in position. On the left flank, Admiral Sungo Park prepared his own forces aboard the dreadnought Taejun's Fury. His ships carried the names of New Eden's dead painted in silver letters that gleamed in the light of Prime Ascendant's twin suns. Every crew member wore photographs of the murdered colonists, reminders of why they had come so far to fight this battle. Remember what we're fighting for, Sungo told his officers. Remember the children who died for no reason except alien cruelty. Make every shot count. The battle began when the first human missiles streaked across space toward the hegemony defensive lines. The aliens fought back with everything they had, their elegant ships dancing through space as they tried to avoid the overwhelming firepower directed at them. But they were vastly outnumbered, facing odds of 20 to 1. Captain Jiyoung Cho watched from her cruiser's bridge as alien vessels threw themselves at the human formations in desperate suicide attacks. She saw one enemy battleship, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere, ram itself directly into a human destroyer in a final act of defiance. They're fighting bravely, her weapons officer observed. Bravery doesn't matter when you're outnumbered this badly, Jiyoung replied coldly. They should have thought about the consequences before they murdered innocent farmers. The hegemony ships were advanced and beautiful, designed by a civilization that had perfected the art of war over thousands of years. But they fell like shooting stars against humanity's industrial might. Where one alien vessel fought, 10 human ships surrounded it. Where they deployed a squadron, humanity responded with an entire fleet. Admiral Sungmin Kwan coordinated the final assault from his command ship, watching as the combined firepower of 500,000 vessels lit up the entire star system. Plasma beams and missile trails crisscrossed space like deadly fireworks, and the explosions of dying ships created new stars that burned briefly before fading to darkness. Enemy defensive lines are collapsing, reported his tactical officer. They're falling back toward the planet. Press the attack, Sungmin ordered. Don't give them time to regroup. And this now. Prime Nexarch Veltar stood on the bridge of his dying flagship, watching his civilization's last hope crumble before his eyes. His ship's hull was torn open in a dozen places, and fires burned throughout the corridors. Around him, the remnants of his once mighty fleet were being systematically destroyed by the endless waves of human vessels. Sir, all defensive positions have been overrun, his aide reported with despair. We've lost 90% of our ships. The humans are demanding our surrender. Veltar looked out at the approaching human armada and finally understood the magnitude of his people's mistake. They had destroyed New Eden to send a message of strength, to warn humanity to stay in their place. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant whose industrial capacity could turn entire star systems into weapons factories. Open a channel to the human fleet, Veltar said quietly. Broadcast on all frequencies. The surrender message reached Fleet Admiral Taehyun Nam as he stood silently on his bridge, watching enemy ships power down their weapons across the system. The aliens' words were filled with defeat and recognition of humanity's overwhelming victory. To the human fleet, Veltar's voice came through the speakers. I am Prime Nexarch Veltar of the Hegemony High Command. I formally surrender all remaining forces under my command. We did not understand what we were facing. We thought you were weak because you chose peace. We were wrong. Taehyun listened to the surrender without emotion, then turned to his aide, Commander Hyojin Song. Establish communication with all known alien civilizations in the galaxy. Send them a message they'll never forget. Hyojin's fingers moved across her control panel, opening channels to every species within 100 light-years. Channel open, sir. This is Fleet Admiral Taehyun Nam of the United Earth Defense Force, he began, his words carrying across space to dozens of different worlds. New Eden has been avenged. Let this be a lesson to any species that thinks humanity's peaceful nature makes us weak. We remember every wrong done to our people, and we have the patience to prepare overwhelming responses to those who threaten us. As the human fleet began its return journey to Earth, alien governments across the galaxy quietly reviewed their policies toward human expansion. The peaceful farmers and traders they had dismissed as harmless had revealed themselves as the most dangerous military force in known space. Admiral Juno Kong oversaw the reconstruction of New Eden, transforming the dead world into both a memorial to the murdered colonists and a monument to the price of underestimating humanity's resolve. The colony would rise again, protected by orbital fortresses and the knowledge that 500,000 ships of war stood ready to defend every human life. The galaxy had learned a terrible lesson that would echo through the ages.